Today we're talking about the three jewels of Buddhism: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And these are the three jewels that we take refuge in. These are the concepts that provide us a stable platform for our practice. We have the Buddha, the enlightenment embodied. We have the Dharma, which are the teachings of truth that lead to enlightenment. And we have the Sangha, the community of practitioners who provide an example of the path in practice. And so these three are all necessary to create a stable platform. If only one of them is in place, then it leads to a sense of obsession, where if we only focus on the Buddha, then what happens is we put the Buddha up on this pedestal, and then it becomes unobtainable because the Buddha's up there, you're down here. And then we start to develop this obsessive quality of only the Buddha is important. And the same thing can happen if we put the Dharma on a pedestal, if we overemphasize only the Dharma. And then we wind up putting books up on pedestals, and we forget about actual practice. We forget about that the Dharma actually leads us to a real possibility. And then, of course, if we put the Sangha up on the pedestal, then now we've just got a political organization that doesn't really practice because they're busy protecting itself. And this has happened in all different types of forms of Buddhism over the centuries, where the foundation, that seat of the three jewels, is no longer supportive. It's lopsided. If we think of the three jewels as the legs of a stool, all three are necessary. If you take away one, then you're going to fall over. If one is longer than the other, then you're going to constantly be wobbling. If you try to just use one by itself, then it's very unstable. You might have very good core, exercise of keeping your balance, but you spend all your time trying to balance. It's not really a place of refuge. But if we have all three jewels equal height, equal importance, it becomes this wonderful seat that we can sit upon, and it supports us through all of the transformations that we experience in our path, in our life, in this world that is constantly changing. So taking refuge in the three jewels is something that we do on a continuous basis. Sometimes we might have a formal declaration when we first come to the path, and we realize that, I'm home. I found my people. My teacher always said that in Buddhism, we're not out recruiting people. We're just looking for those that have practiced in past lives. We're looking for people who are looking for their home, who are looking to remember this pathway that they have walked before in various forms. So we're not recruiting new people, we're just looking for old friends. And we might take this formal vow of refuge where we say, you know, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. And then we might forget about it for a while. But if we can remember that, oh, these jewels are actually a support, they're actually a seat for me to sit on that provides a sense of stability in this ever-changing world, in this ever-changing practice. So when we feel that instability, we feel that confusion, our bodies freak out, our minds freak out, the world freaks out, sometimes all three at once, we can remember the refuge, and we can come back to that seat of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and just spend a few minutes contemplating, what is this Buddha, what is this Dharma, what is this Sangha? And reach into those concepts, reach into those energies, and find this very wonderful and beautiful support that holds us in the center of things. It creates the space of stillness in the middle of the tornado. And from there, we can begin our practice again. We can say, oh, okay, I have this support now. Let me maybe meditate for a few minutes. Now let me practice some mindfulness and see what needs to be done. And this allows us to act from a very stable place instead of trying to manage a tornado. But it doesn't work if you only cling to one jewel. If you push away like the Buddha and say, oh, well, nobody can really be enlightened. That really can't happen. So you just cut a leg off of the stool. And then so now when you like go to your Sangha, you kind of look at them like, well, these are just ordinary people. And they're not. These are practitioners of Buddhism. These are powerful, determined people who are committed to compassion and wisdom. So pay attention to when you are seeking refuge. And if you're not finding it, it's probably because you've cut a leg off the stool. So examine that and say, okay, well, what is it that I need to do to really feel into that connection with my Sangha? What is it that I need to do to feel that connection to Dharma? What is it that I need to do to feel that connection to Buddha? And then allow yourself the space and time to actually do that and make sure your stool is level and that you have that support. Now, sometimes we hear about a fourth jewel, the jewel of the teacher. But in my view, the teacher, that's a very decorative element. It's this extra leg on your stool that doesn't quite reach the bottom. It's there if you feel unsteady. Like maybe you're not feeling the Buddha, or you're not feeling the Dharma, you're not feeling the Sangha, and one of those legs is a little wobbly, a little shaky. The teacher, then that extra support, again, doesn't quite reach the bottom, but it's there. So when you start to tip, the teacher catches you. And then that teacher, because they know they're not important, can then help you shore up the missing jewel, the missing piece that has caused you to tip. Now, sometimes it happens that the teacher might have some self-importance, and then now all of a sudden their support post is now touching the ground, and then it starts to creep up a little bit, and then that's when you get really wobbly organizations. So at that point, it's really helpful to like chop down the teacher post a little bit. Again, you don't want it completely stubby, because then it doesn't provide any support. So I'm not saying that we should just throw out all the teachers. I'd be out of a job, which I think is okay. I'm okay with that. But it serves a purpose, this fourth jewel, but it's not on equal footing as the other three, is the point. The point of the fourth jewel is to make sure the other three are intact and are level, and this provides the actual support for the student who's seeking enlightenment. So, does anybody have any questions or comments or anything you want to share from your practice with the three jewels? Yes.
I don't know if I made it up myself or if I read it somewhere, but I used to take the Buddha aspect of the three jewels as your living enlightened teacher in this lifetime. You know, it's still all respect to the gods, goddesses, and Buddhas, but I saw it as the Dharma, the teachings, the Sangha, the people, the community, the friends on the path. And then the Buddha, if I was born a long time ago, would have been him. But now it's like whoever is the enlightened person in your life, that was like the Buddha, you know what I mean? But I like the four ways too.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool to keep everything in balance.
So the Buddha, who we call the Buddha Shakyamuni, wasn't the first Buddha. This is the first Buddha of this cycle, of this world cycle, but he's not the first Buddha. So I love your comment of that is a good way to start. And again, that's the teacher shoring up that Buddha leg of the stool. But the Buddha, the Dharmakaya, the endless clear light, is this embodiment of enlightenment that has been present for eons, well before Shakyamuni. But we are very fortunate to live in these times where we have that very high teacher who went through many, many lifetimes to attain enlightenment and then to teach for so long in his lifetime that he was able to have enough students who retained enough of the information to actually tell the stories and then eventually write them down and share the teachings. So we have a collection of Dharma in physical form that we can then access. But I like that way of looking at it, because really the teacher is the embodiment of all three jewels. Because we are as a teacher, we're an example of how to practice Dharma. We're an example of Buddha nature, Buddha mind. And then we are also the whole community of practitioners, an example of what that is like. So yes.
So what do you do? It's just got me thinking about the letters that we receive from prisoners. And obviously, this jewel of Sangha would be difficult for them to attain unless they're very fortunate that there's a group of people in that specific dorm that they're in. What do you do then if you lack the ability to access like a physical presence with a Sangha?
Well, a physical presence with Sangha is always ideal, right? That's always the best. But again, these jewels are not physical. So Sangha refers to not just the community of practitioners in this room, it refers to all practitioners throughout all time and space. So when we reach into that jewel of Sangha, we're not just thinking about the people that we know and practice with. We're thinking about every single being who has had the aspiration to practice Dharma. And that helps us remember that, oh, even though I'm physically alone in this space, like one of the prisoners that writes to us, they might not know anybody else that's trying to meditate, but they can still access the jewel of Sangha by just contemplating, like, wow, there's thousands, millions of people in the world right now who are trying to also meditate, who are also practicing Dharma. And then in that instant of recognition, we're no longer alone, and we have that support. So that's a very good question. So we'll keep today's talk short. And so I just want to encourage you to really utilize this seat of the three jewels. Like I said, use it not only when you're struggling, which is, that's what we often do, is we wait until we're like completely caught in the tornado and then we're grasping for the tools. And it's like being on that, what was that? I've heard it. I wasn't, this is before my time, but I've heard about, there was this ride at Disneyland. It was a merry-go-round or something. And as you went around, you were trying to grab the brass ring, and then you get like a prize or something. So instead of doing that, being in the tornado of suffering and then trying to grab a hold of one of your tools, start to contemplate these three jewels on a regular basis. Just pull them up every so often and notice, like, okay, am I seated on the three jewels? Is every leg even? Can I feel into the Buddha? Can I feel into the Dharma? Can I feel into the Sangha? And do I have that support from all three jewels? And if we do this on a regular basis, then when we do get caught up in the tornado, it's that much easier to pull back into that. It's there. It's instead of having to wait for the swirling to come around and grab a hold of the ring. Instead, it's just, oh, yep, I'm swirling right now. Let me find my seat, and then I will sit on my stable seat of three jewels as I spin around. And it's not so challenging that way, because even though everything is transforming and changing around and within you, you still have this stillness, you still have this connection. So play with that teaching of the three jewels and utilize all three of them.